For the late start. Just so everybody is aware, we have a sign language interpreter, and the camera is going to need to be fixed on them for the entire meeting. So the camera will not pan as normal to anybody testifying or any of the members of the committee. So that camera will be fixed on the sign language interpreter, and I think most everybody in here understands that completely. Okay. So we're going to call to order the October 18th meeting of the 1915C Home and Community-Based Services Waiver Redesign Task Force. And at this time, if we could, let's go ahead and take roll. And if you could, please indicate whether you're in the room, in your office, remotely, or remotely in your district. Thank you.
Senator Carroll. Senator Meredith.
Present in the room.
Senator Parrott. Senator Elliott. Representative Kirk McCormick.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Stevenson. Senator Rocky Adams. Present in the room. Representative Riley.
Present in the room.
Thank you.
At this time, if we could have approval of the minutes. Anybody would like to make a motion for the September 20th minutes? Senator Meredith make a motion. Second by Senator Adams. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. The first members that are going, the people that are going to testify about the importance of waiver services and barriers to care are going to be Sherry Pickett, and Sharon Raymond. So if Ms. Pickett and Ms. Raymond could please come up to the front table. I apologize for you guys not getting any TV time.
They should be.
Okay, if you could please introduce yourself for the record. Thank you.
My name is Sherry Pickett.
My name is Sharon Raymond.
Okay, if you guys could go ahead and proceed. Thank you.
The waiver is very important for the as a parent when you have a child that has complex needs.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. If you could make that microphone come a little closer to you, if you move a little closer, and make sure the green light is pushed. There we go. Thank you.
Sorry. As a parent with a child with complex medical needs, it's very important for the Michelle P. waiver to continue. Without these services, my son Matthew could not participate in the community. And with these services, it's allowed me to be able to stay home with him, to care for him. I do his vitals weekly for the cardiologist and take him to the doctors. We're constantly on the phone with his clinical team at Cincinnati. He's very complex, and it's just, for him, he does better at home than in a hospital setting or a medical setting, facility type.
Thank you, Sherry. Sharon?
Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Raymond. My daughter, Jessie, and I would like to thank the committee for allowing me to share my experiences and observations on the need for Medicaid waiver reform. While the waiver meets the needs for many people with disabilities, it leaves out the individuals with extreme behavioral challenges. One example is my daughter, Jessica. Jessie is 22. If you look, she's the green folder that you guys have. Did you guys get those? Yeah. Okay. Jessie is 22, and she was diagnosed at an early age with autism, moderate intellectual disabilities, with an IQ of less than 50. Thank you. Jessie also has atypical bipolar disorder, generalized anxiety disorder with features of OCD, panic, and social anxiety, which all lead to the behavioral challenges. Jessie also has mood instabilities and irregular sleep patterns. Jessie and people like her have many behavioral challenges that present barriers to their ability to live independently. Jessie has difficulty with impulse control and tends to do whatever she thinks about at the time. This includes leaving her home. Jessie has trouble with transitions and at times will stay at the park or the store for many hours before she decides it's time to leave. Jessie does not use community safety skills and may run into traffic or be at risk for getting into strange vehicles. Jessie and others like her have emotional outbursts regularly that put her at risk for harming herself and or property. She often becomes agitated for reasons that may be out of her control, such as not feeling well, or something in the environment not working as she thinks. She then engages in property destruction, including hitting or knocking over items. She often can turn over large pieces of furniture. These behavioral outbursts put her at risk for harming herself unintentionally, as well as risk of harm to the environment. Having staff present to remove dangerous items and assist her with calming strategies significantly reduces the frequency and duration of these incidents. Jessie requires 24/7 staff to be present as she is unaware of basic safety measures. Jessie does not always follow a reliable sleep routine and may awaken and get up during the night or odd times during the early morning hours. Jessie requires support in all activities and daily living. She loves to be out in the community, but due to Jessie's complexities, caregivers often leave. This is heartbreaking for Jessie because she becomes very attached to her caregivers. Caregivers often leave and care for individuals with less behavioral challenges. Jessie thrives on consistency and schedule. Due to the complexity of her behaviors, Jessie and others with similar challenges need a trained and sometimes two caregivers to keep her and the environment safe. Look at the handout that I sent to you and look at the kind of destruction this 5'5" sweet little girl can do when she is in a manic mode. About 3 years ago, I had to make the hardest decision of my life. Jessie was having a difficult time with behaviors, and me being a single mom, I was advised to put Jessie in an institution. This turned out to be a disaster for Jess. She lost community access, she lost making her own choices, and could not even make friends. It took me 6 months to bring her home. She now has a fear of returning, which I will not allow to ever happen again. Jessie was given the choice of a group home. Well, it turns out group homes will not accept her due to her behavioral challenges and safety for the other residents. Jessie needs to feel some independence. Jessie loves me so much, and I am the most important figure in her life, and she is my world. But Jessie recognizes that she is an adult and would like some independence to live on her own. I have made it possible for Jessie to keep her home, and I could move out. However, Jessie does need the 24/7 care, which would include awake, trained staff at all times. This is where the Medicaid waiver, if changed, could help her and many others like her. The SCL waiver will pay for 16 hours of care, but not overnights. Therefore, I cannot move out, so Jess and I can have a mother-daughter relationship versus a caregiver-client relationship. Individuals with behavioral challenges and complex disabilities are so caring, loving, and sweet most of the time, but also have trouble with communication and anxiety that they cannot control their behaviors. The Medicaid waiver needs to consider that these unique individuals need trained staff and incentive to stay and help them. The waiver pays caregivers the same amount across the board. If caregivers were paid based on an individual's need and level of care and not treat everyone with special needs as a group with the same level of care, pay grades should be based on how complex the individual needs are. For an example, a CNA, they are paid at a different rate than a registered nurse, and that's based on the level of care that they give. The waiver pays for 24/7 if they were to live in a group home or an institution. Why not help individuals stay in their home and live independently? Isn't that the purpose? SCL stands for Support of Community Living. I ask that Medicaid waiver reform pay the caregivers based on an individual's needs and level of care versus putting them all in the same group. There are many individuals with autism that have uncontrollable behaviors, and they need stability, routine, and love. An institution is not a home. Please help those with unique differences stay in their home as an adult. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry, for your testimony. At this time, if any of the committee members would like to ask any questions. Senator Meredith.
Ladies, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I always appreciate your testimony. And when we hear them firsthand, it means so much more, and you certainly have our attention. But your suggestion about changing the pay rates for people who are providing this assistance, you mentioned like a care attendant versus an RN, but you really mean something beyond that, that within each of those there would be some type of criteria that...
Yes.
The ones that would service training to deal with her behaviors and how to know what the precursors are. So it takes a special person. Why work with somebody with behavior challenges for $50 an hour when I can
Go work for this adult and, let's help her cook and make brownies and go to the store and help her get dressed.
Are you aware of any states that presently do this? And what I'm trying to get at is just, I always hate to reinvent the wheel. If there's something out there that's already structured that we can model after, that would certainly be beneficial. Are you aware of anything? I'd appreciate that, and I appreciate your testimony. Again, thank you.
Yeah, she's getting it. Okay. Any other members? Senator Adams.
Oh,
Thank you. I just wanted to point out.
sorry.
I just wanted to point out that Matthew is in the room with us today, and so Matthew, thanks for joining us today here in the committee.
Hi, Matthew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sherry, do you want to add anything else, or?
Just the importance with complex medical needs. It's, of course, about the same. It's a little different, but just making sure that we have the funds available for parents to be able to stay home to take care of their individuals with complex medical needs. It's very hard to find someone to care for them and to trust someone with Matthew's level of care. I have very little support at home, and it's just hard to trust someone with his level of care, with his heart issues, with his skin issues we have to watch for, just so many different things that I have to watch for throughout the day. And just like today on the way up, I was on the phone with Cincinnati Children's. His neurologist nurse, he was having difficulties with the new medication. So we've been making medication dosage change today on the way up. So it's a constant 24-hour care. And they just do better at home when they get that providing care from a parent or someone that they can trust. It's very hard, and especially with respite care, finding someone to do the respite care as well. I did provide some handouts on Matthew. He's very active. He's involved in Special Olympics. He's involved in the community. We do get out. He's very active. He likes to be able to talk about his heart condition, tetralogy of Fallot. That's something new that we actually just started with Somerset Community College physical therapy students. So that's something new he's enjoying doing. He loves to cook. His goal is to be a chef. He was actually training at a local diner right before the pandemic. So he's not been able to return back to the workforce because of the pandemic.
Okay. Any other members? Sharon, it's obvious you guys are very loving mothers, and we really truly appreciate your testimony today, and your children are very lucky they have you. Very lucky.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. The next on the agenda is the rights of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we're going to have Representative Mark Hart, Scott Romano, and members of Protection and Advocacy for Persons with Developmental Disabilities, PAD. Representative Hart, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then have any of your other members that are going to testify to introduce themselves also.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Representative Mark Hart. What the individuals to the right of me is going to talk about here in a few minutes is some legislation I've been working on since 2020 for obvious reasons with the pandemic and the way our legislative sessions worked out. We've not had an opportunity to fully vet this bill and to get it moving. So I'm hoping this coming session and with this hearing that I'm going to be able to have the opportunity to explain to y'all what our attempts are and some of the things that we're seeking to obtain in our piece of legislation might be similar to what you're all working on. So this might be something that we can work in concert with each other to get a piece of legislation out here that can address more than just one need. With that being said, I'm going to let the individuals at the table here introduce themselves to you guys. But before I do that, I'd also like to recognize that Camille Collins, who's the Federal Program Specialist for the Kentucky Protection and Advocacy Office, is here with us. She's in the audience. And so is Sherry Pickett, who just testified. She's the parent rep on the Protection and Advocacy for Persons with Developmental Disabilities, which these two gentlemen to my left and right of me are a part of as well. So with that being said, Grayson, I'm going to let you introduce yourself first so that we can get Frankie positioned behind the mic.
My name is Grayson Kemplin, and I'm a person with a developmental disability. I'm autistic, and I have neuromotor issues.
My name is Scott Romano. I'm the parent of 3 special needs children.
My name is Frank Hoffman. I'm on the PAD board at PNA, and I also have a CP as my condition.
I'm going to let Frankie start our presentation, and then we'll let Grayson go from there.
I wanted to speak with you guys today about the Bill of Rights that is being proposed for people with disabilities. This bill is important to me because it would help undefine our rights a little more in Kentucky. Because we have the ADA, but sometimes it doesn't meet all of our needs. And this bill will help us do what we would like to do in life, just like anybody else without a disability.
Thank you, Frankie. Grayson, go ahead.
Thank you. As was said, I'm a member of Protection and Advocacy's Developmental Disability Board, which is a group of disability advocates and parent advocates that advises the state agency on issues Kentuckians with disabilities face. And so today we want to talk to you about a piece of proposed legislation for the 2022 session, which is the Kentucky Disability Bill of Rights. Access to medical treatment, pursuing a job, fair wages, timely transportation, and participation in the political process. These are rights that able-bodied people take for granted in their daily lives. But they're something that people with disabilities regularly struggle with, even in the modern day. These issues, and many more, were the reason why, around the 1980s, people with disabilities across the nation started the fight for their civil rights, taking inspiration from other movements of the time. In fact, Kentucky was the seat of this movement. The Disability Rag, the movement's national publication, came out of Louisville, and many famous advocates called Kentucky their home. It was this Kentucky-grown movement that made a strong impact nationwide, and is the reason why we have national legislation like the Americans with Disabilities Act. Sadly, the Kentucky state's government first go-around with policy protecting the rights of people with disabilities didn't address all of the issues the federal government wasn't able to pick up. And as time went on, the vigor for disability rights slowly eroded. Because of this, people with disabilities continue to face some of the same issues they faced all those years ago. And many have forgotten the reason why our current legislation exists to begin with. These prevailing issues are what led to the creation of the Kentucky Disability Bill of Rights, which directly lists the rights that people with disabilities should have as equal citizens. This bill may not have litigation power or allot funds to any specific projects, but perhaps it's best not to think of this bill as something that commits to an action, but rather something that states our intention. Think of how an organization, a university for example, has a mission statement that outlines who they are, what they stand for, and what their goals are. That statement doesn't need to force the organization to commit to a specific action to hold importance. Instead, it's important because it sets out an intention and vision for the future. This is the role that the Kentucky Disability Bill of Rights can play in Kentucky legislature, a mission statement for the Commonwealth for protecting the rights of people with disabilities. Other states like Ohio and California have their own Bill of Rights and display it with pride. Considering Kentucky's deep history with disability advocacy, we too should make a Disability Bill of Rights a proud and prominent part of our state, and hold it as a reminder for future generations why the disability rights movement started and continues in Kentucky. Based on past experience, we have reason to believe that it will be placed in the Health and Family Services Committee. We ask that members of the committee give this bill a hearing and consider the need for it and the impact it can make on the lives of people with disabilities. Thank you for this opportunity today.
That's a mic drop right there. I don't know if I can follow that one. My name is Scott Romano. I'm the parent of 3 special needs adult children. One of my children is biological. The other 2 were adopted. Their names are Lisa Marie, Larissa, and Sarah. I'm also a coach of Special Olympics right here in Frankfurt. I coach 6 teams now, so I'm also speaking for about 35 disabled adult athletes, if you will. The importance of this task force, this redesign, cannot be underestimated. This is the most vulnerable class of citizens in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, truly the least of the least, those who cannot repay you in any way except for a thank you and a smile. They cannot fight for their rights, and if they do, their voice is soft and the words are hard to come by. So others, like the ones you hear today, are speaking on their behalf. It's a privilege, it's an honor, it's a duty, and a heartfelt calling to do so. I've said it before, and I will state it clearly to this task force, and I've discussed it with some of the parents here, and they agree. It's better to be a horse in Kentucky than a disabled person. I can say this from my experience in fighting for services for my disabled daughter in California for 24 years, Tennessee for 2, and Kentucky for the last 13 years. In 2002, a person named Michelle sued the state because the SCL waiver list had 3,000 people on it. Along with protection and advocacy in 2008, after 6 years of court battles, the Commonwealth agreed to provide an additional waiver, which we call the Michelle P. waiver. Fast forward to 2021, 13 years later, and the situation is now worse than in 2002. The waiting lists are now triple what they were in 2002. How is this acceptable to anyone here? There are 2 things that will motivate this task force to do the right thing and address the issues that are being presented today. Number 1, the moral motivation. We pray for you to act on compassion. Do the right thing, listen to the speakers, and act now. Number 2, the financial motivation. Using data from 2009 and adjusting for inflation, it cost the Commonwealth $320,966 to care for a disabled adult in a state institution. Alternately, the HCB waiver is estimated at $62,504. That's 19 cents on the dollar. That's a heck of a good business decision in my eyes. If the Commonwealth had to supply institutional care for the adults on the 1915C waivers, that cost would surpass $3.2 billion per year. The recommendations before you is less than 10% of that amount, and it actually should be more. Since COVID, many caregivers, parents, and guardians have lost help. With a lack of workers today, which is everywhere, this problem is exacerbated, and you've heard from some of those parents today. Add to that the HBC waiver payment rate is as low as $11 an hour, and the problem is insurmountable. Adult Day Healthcare states that their services include skilled nursing services, 1 meal per day plus snacks, RN supervision, regularly scheduled daily activities, and routine personal and healthcare needs. It's pretty impressive. That reimbursement rate is $11 an hour. Respite is $12.20 an hour. Still can't get a caregiver at that. Yet supported employment is $45.12 an hour. There's something wrong there. I have battled in 3 states for services. Twice now in Kentucky just for simple adult daycare transportation. I lost in one of those cases. I made it a political nightmare and I got it. I lost again after COVID. And I had to go all the way up to the governor's office and come back down through the commissioner of Medicaid before my daughter got transportation again. My daughter's 37 years old. I have no responsibility for her legally. There are greater opportunities for education, socialization, and happiness when disabled adults can live in the community with their caregivers, with their parents. By the way, we're not considered parents in the eyes of the court because my daughter's rights were literally taken away. We're considered guardians, and guardians, our only legal rights are to make financial and health decisions, nothing else. Senator Meredith, one thing I do want to bring up to you is take a look at the Lanterman Act in California, 1967. That is pretty much the forerunner of the Michelle P. to keep people out of institutions. That was 50 years ago. Okay. And just to clarify, we're talking about adults here. There are some children, but everyone that you've seen here is an adult. Legally, that's only our responsibility. And yet the state, in every battle that we face, wants to put 100% of the burden on us. It's not fair. We're just asking for a little bit of help. We're not asking for you to do everything, but stop fighting us for keeping our adults at home. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for testimony. Representative Hart, you want to add something else?
No, I was just going to say at this time we're willing to field any questions if anybody might have.
Okay, Senator Meredith.
Hey, Chairman Riley. Again, appreciate the testimonies here. Just for my own education, you made reference to the American Disabilities Act, which I believe was passed in 1990, and you view it as deficient. That's why we need this Kentucky Bill of Rights. Can you identify some of those deficiencies for me? What does ADA not include that should be included? Is that a fair question?
Well, the ADA has a lot of puts a lot on education and on housing, especially Olmsted versus LC covered a lot of what the ADA didn't cover there. But there are some more kind of basic human rights, some things that's not as much about living as much as the characteristics of being human, like socialization, like being able to pursue job opportunities. Simple things that you might not think are problems off of the top of your head, but yet people with disabilities still face problems with them because of barriers in the community. The ADA has done a great job of picking up what it could do, but the federal government had its limits of what it could provide at its time. The state governments were able to pick up another couple of things, and Kentucky has some legislation similar to the Bill of Rights that's still very limited. The Kentucky Bill of Rights puts forward this statement of intention that although we may not have any current legislation that puts forward these rights in a way that's actionable, this is our intention for the Commonwealth. These are the rights that people with disabilities deserve, and this is what we should be pursuing towards in the future. Thank you.
I think to everyone on this committee, this is just common sense. And when you look at the financial model, Mr. Romano, like you talked about, should be common sense, but you'd be amazed at the void of common sense that exists in Frankfurt. It's bewildering at times and very frustrating for all of us who've been in the private sector. But I certainly agree with that. But being common sense, we have a running joke in the legislature about this is just a simple little bill. There is no such thing as a simple little bill. It's right up there with the unicorn and Sasquatch. It just doesn't exist. But I understand that probably funding is a resistance to this because it commits us to do something. But aside from that, where does the resistance come from to not pass this?
Or you actually ask?
We've been asking the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it, I guess it wasn't meant to be a rhetorical question. I thought maybe Representative Hart may have some insight into this since we've pursued it before. But I know part of it is the fact that, we file over close to 1,000 pieces of legislation every session, and we're lucky to pass 200. So the bandwidth to get something done is very, very difficult. And I don't know what it takes to get something to rise up to the top, but I guess persistence keep coming and to testify. But are there any groups that may be resistant to that? That's what I'm trying to figure out where the pushback comes from.
To answer your question, Senator Meredith, we've not, I haven't really incurred any resistance to the bill, the people that's actually seen the bill. I think the issue that it was filed, the original bill for this, House Bill 169, was filed late in 2020, and then of course our wonderful friend COVID hit, and we just have never had the opportunity to really get this out there to the legislators and get it vetted. And to this date, we've really not received a lot of. We have people that's asked a lot of questions, but I think it's been more for clarity than any other reason. I've not really incurred any. Once when people understand what our intentions are and what the intentions of the bill is, we've not really, to my knowledge, have had any resistance at this point.
I'd just like to add something here. There's enough parents and people that are on this waiver that when you guys are ready to do that, we'll go door to door. We'll knock on every single door here and get signatures for you. Okay? We're not like the horse industry. We don't have a lobby group that does this. we got to do it ourselves. So we'll be more than happy to do that, right? There you go.
I suspect, Mr. Romano, that the fiscal considerations is probably the biggest challenge. I'm not saying that's insurmountable, but the testimony, and I'm co-chair of Budget Review for Human Services, and every group that's come before us this past summer has tremendous financial requests that we need to consider. And Mark Twain said that when the world came to an end, he hoped he was in Kentucky because everything happens 20 years later. I think he missed it maybe by a decade. So I appreciate what you're saying. And, right now we have a lot of our problems are masked by the federal government's COVID relief funds, and we think we're in good financial shape, but I'm telling you, probably we're not. And I really think from a fiscal standpoint, we're probably around 1970, and we've got to step forward. We need more revenue. We need to spend our dollars more judiciously, and we don't do a good job of that. But believe me, I've heard your message, and Mr. Chair, I just truly appreciate the opportunity to get to serve on this task force. Certainly didn't volunteer for it. I was asked by leadership to do it, but I appreciate it. It's been a great education for me and a very humbling experience. So I think your testimony, appreciate you being here today. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Meredith. And Sal, one thing I'd like to mention is you may not have high-paid lobbyists, but you guys are doing a pretty good job of lobbying right now. Senator Adams?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was going to kind of speak in the same vein. One of the things that struck me when you all were speaking was that, if you look at it, the foster care contingent has a Bill of Rights, and the nursing home community has their own Bill of Rights. And so I think this, in the same vein, falls into, kind of an education about what your community needs. I just recently, I have a friend whose kids turned 18, and so she had to proceed with the guardianship and all the legal ramifications that come with, being in charge of her children now, which she was in charge of her children before, and now she's in charge of her children again. And I remember it struck me when she told me that one of the questions they asked her was, would you like for your children to still have their voting rights? And she said, well, of course I do. But that was remarkable to me, that there would be a consideration that her children after the age of 18 would not be allowed to vote. And so I think what you're doing here today is wonderful. I think the more education that you all can do is to your benefit and to our benefit. And so I just want to encourage you all to keep doing what you're doing. Like Senator Meredith and Chairman Riley, I think this is a really promising piece of legislation to look at come 2022. So thank you for presenting today.
Thank you, Senator Adams. Representative Kirk McCormick.
Thank you very much for coming out here today. I am a retired social worker / rehabilitation counselor, and I have a lot of empathy with anyone. We don't call it a disability, we call it an impairment. But Grayson, thank you very much. I wonder if you're involved with vocational rehab. Do you have a counselor?
At this time, I do, yes.
Very good, very good. Wonderful. They're pretty much federally funded, and they get a few dollars of state funding. So you stay with them, and they'll take you far. Secondly, I personally have a great nephew that's autistic, and I've watched the struggles of our family in trying to cope with him on a daily basis, get him education. My niece actually, with 3 children, went to college and got a degree in psychology, and now she's also working in behavioral health and with Asperger spectrum. And I see the personal need of the waiver program probably more than anyone on the committee, because I dealt with the individuals all the way from institutionalization to independent living. So it is very difficult to even find someone as a caretaker, regardless of what the pay is. He just recently got the Michelle P. waiver, and his mother did for him, and they've already been through, within the past, just this year alone, they've been through attendance, and they just can't deal with it, and so I see the need for some specialized training for the individuals that's going to work with individuals with impairments. So I want you to know that I'm 110% behind you guys. Just to let you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Meredith?
Just want to thank you again for your testimony, but Grayson, I really like your fashion sense. I hope Representative Hart's paying attention. So. That's all I have, Mr.
Duly noted, Senator.
Representative Hart and Frankie and Grayson and Sal, thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it so much. And Grayson, are you going to be a communications director or something like that?
We'll just have to see what the future has in store.
All right. All right. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you all so much.
All right, at this time we'll have Pam Smith. I think Pam's on remotely online. And Pam, you've got two different sections. The first is going to deal with waiver services, reimbursement rate changes, an overview of the rate setting process and recommendations. So Pam, do you hear us?
I do. Can you all hear me? Let me share the presentation.
Yes, we hear you well, Pam.
Okay. And if you all just let me know when you can see the presentation.
Pam, if you could hold on for a second. We're not going to be able to get interpretation services with this program, so just so everybody's aware. And Pam, go ahead and proceed.
So thank you again for allowing me to come and testify. And I have had the pleasure of working directly with everyone that has testified before me, and always enjoy listening to Grayson speak and to listening to his ideas. So as you mentioned, Representative Riley, we have 2 points that we are going to talk about today. The first one I'm going to address is the reimbursement rates. And so, sorry, I'm to coordinate 2 different computers here. So, okay. So, just some basic information about reimbursement rates. Most of them are paid in units. For most services, a unit is equal to 15 minutes, but it can vary based on what the service is. Units are rounded. So prior to actually the implementation of electronic visit verification, we did not round units up, but we found with the implementation of that a lot of times you may have somebody provide a service for 14 minutes and 59 seconds. Without that rounding, that individual then would lose a reimbursement for that 15-minute unit. So we chose to follow the same method that is in place for state plan services. And as long as the service has been provided for at least 8 minutes, then it will be rounded up to that 15-minute unit. Participants can have multiple services on their person-centered plan. They cannot receive more than one service at a time, with only a couple exceptions to that. And most services have limits, whether those are a hard limit or a soft limit. And there was some additional information that was shared that has a document that makes it a little bit easier to see the service information and the limits. So what else we're going to cover today is the guidance on the federal guidance on rate changes, recommendations that we have, as well as I wanted to share another document with you all, which is, and I think this is very important because sometimes we forget when we're talking about the money and the services, we forget about the who behind it. Something that my division has started recently, and we refer to it as the why of our job, is there is a document that has participant stories in it. We featured 2 individuals so far. Our 3rd individual is in the works. We're going to be talking to someone that has a physical disability and uses HCB services. But we feature them in our quarterly newsletter, as well as compiling into this document that really talks about what has Waiver meant to them and what has Waiver done for them. Now, unfortunately, everything's not happy. Everything's not positive all the time. So I will share, there are stories that I keep behind and keep to myself that, again, are the why of why we do this job, why it's important to talk about, some of the sad things that have happened. I feel like it is our responsibility to provide equal opportunity and access to services that allow individuals to achieve their person-centered goals, to age in place, and really to be just like any other peer, to have the same opportunities and be able to live their lives the same way. That I'm going to get started. After this part about rates, then I am going to go into a small presentation on the American Rescue Plan Act and the additional funds that we are receiving through that. So just to start out, to list the waivers, again, just to remind everybody, we have 6 home and community-based 1915C waivers. We have the 2 that focused on individuals with brain injuries, our large home and community-based waiver that serves individuals with physical disabilities or who are aged, our Model 2 waiver program for individuals that are ventilator dependent or in an active weaning process, and then our 2 waivers for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities, Michelle P. and SCL. Sorry, coordinating 3 screens here. So just to set off the stage, I think a lot of times people will hear a reimbursement rate and automatically they think, okay, that's the pay rate. You pay, $14 an hour. So $14 an hour is the wage that the individual gets. But it's important to not forget that those reimbursement rates also have to go towards things like transportation costs, benefits, facility cost, occupancy cost, administrative overhead, and non-billing activities. So when you hear, the reimbursement rate is $14 an hour, that does not automatically mean that that individual that's providing that service is going to see that entire $14 an hour. The amount's going to vary based on what the administrative cost is to deliver the service, as well as what the reimbursement and payment method that each employer has decided to implement for their employees, what benefits that they decide to offer. The next few slides, we're going to go through some of the actual rates of services. I did not include all of them just because they're, as you will see in that handout, each of the waivers, with the exception of Model 2, has over 10 individual services. So we group them into some light categories to speak about. So the first one is adult day health care. Right now, while it's offered in the ABI program, we don't really see its utilization. The majority of the time it's utilized in HCB and Michelle P. and SCL. It is the adult day training service, but it's provided for those individuals that are a little more complex and need that medical oversight. There is a level 2 reimbursement in home and community based. And that is for the individuals that need more intensive medical monitoring. You may see that they have their blood sugar gets checked and they may have sliding scale insulin, or they have complex dressing changes, or they need a more frequent assessment. The next service we're going to look at is day training. So you'll see that they're the 4 programs that offer that are both of the ABIs, Michelle P. and SCL. You also will see how widely The rate varies between the two. As far as what the intention is of the service, it does not really differ between the four programs. And one thing to think about, sometimes when you think day training, people automatically think, okay, it's somebody going to a facility and they're kind of sitting in that facility doing, one particular task. This can involve them also working offsite in collaboratives with different employers, for example, with Toyota. There are actually some of the distilleries where some of our day training facilities work in conjunction with them, and they may box or prepare goods for shipment. The next service we're going to talk about is non-specialized respite. The care and expectations for respite in each of these programs are really similar. So each may have some individuals who require more intense oversight. The basic premise is identical, yet the rates, as you can see, differ from $11 to $16 an hour. The skill level of the individual providing the service should also be matched to the skill level of the recipient. Respite can be provided in a congregate setting, such as an adult daycare, and also it may be provided in residential settings for the ABI and SCL individuals. There are times where we have actual residential homes that open up, and that maybe if a family, say, needs a weekend or they need a longer stint of respite, that it's provided in those situations. Respite is a critical service. It's one I often get up on a soapbox about, because being a primary caregiver is hard. It's intense. It's exhausting. To be an effective caregiver, you really do need that time away, and you need that time for the individual, and the recipients honestly need the time away from you as their caregiver too. Caregiver burnout is a real concern, especially among individuals that are providing 24-hour care or near 24-hour care to an individual with a disability. The next group of services we're going to look at are home-based services. So the rates listed are from traditional and participant-directed services, with the exception of home and community sports. You'll notice under HCB you have a rate for an attendant care, and you have a rate that's titled home and community supports. This service is identical with the exception of who is providing the care, whether it be an agency or it be a participant-directed employee that the participant has hired. Recently, during a call that we had with CMS even stressed the importance that the care provided to the individuals, as well as the expectation of those employees, is identical, whether it's being provided through an agency or as a PDS employee. The max rate we found that HCB PDS employees are receiving after taxes or other necessary deductions is actually $10.50 an hour. And I believe, if you all will remember, when I testified last time, and Mr. Campbell, who a lot of people are familiar with Arthur, and his quote that individuals who work in sanitation and that are picking up garbage are making more than he is allowed to pay employees that help him with some of his most intimate tasks. While there had been some initial thoughts of unbundling some of these services, through our experience with electronic visit verification, we have decided that it almost makes more sense to have services remain bundled, so that when an individual comes in and provides care, they're providing maybe their personal care assistance, they're providing any support with their instrumental activities of daily living, such as helping them to do laundry or helping them to prep meals or to clean or to run errands, as well as potentially transportation into the community, going to the doctor's office with them, going to the grocery, or running other errands. We did not highlight the different residential rates. Services provided through residential do not cover room and board, but really these are the employees that are helping with personal care services. So the same types of services that these traditional employees or PDS employees providing home-based services are providing. We found through the pandemic the need to look at family home provider model. While they the concept behind family home providing is that an individual will come into a family's home and will become part of their family. But what the service fails to offer is really any support for that caregiver if they need respite, for example, or, as we found during the pandemic, they still need to work, but the individual needs help with personal care, and they may have been receiving that at adult daycare or with adult day training. They may have been receiving some of those supports. So really looking at what are we offering in all of the residential models. We also would like to look at how can we explore more shared living and technology assisted residential. Some individuals may not want someone in their home all of the time, but they may need that supervision. So how can technology help us to meet that need? There's a lot of really great technology that's out there today that would allow for things such as, if you think about the button that I've fallen and I can't get at, that type of technology, as well as motion sensors, and as we imply and use more telehealth, so some of those remote monitoring options. Shared living is also a interesting concept because an individual can find a friend or someone that they know that in exchange for that person helping them to they help provide meals, or they may help with the personal care or be there for supervision, they're able to be reimbursed for a portion of their costs that they incur living with the individual, so their portion of the rent and other expenses. This last slide, again, it continues in some of the home-based services. I'm not going to go through all of those, but if you'll notice that Michelle P is the only one that has the homemaker and her personal care split out again, and a traditional or PDS employee for the same service that is comparable to attendant care or companion in or personal assistance in some of the other waivers is paid about an average of $28 an hour if they're providing both services. For identical services, again, most cases, the care provided to an HCV recipient is more intense, requiring more hands-on assistance, heavy lifting, versus the instruction and cueing of the recipient to complete the task. So the rate structure that we have in place right now, if you think of paying $28 an hour to have someone remind someone to take a bath or have someone cue them through fixing a meal, is double in the case of participant directed services what we're paying the same person to actually lift someone on and off the toilet, or change a brief, actually physically do a bath, actually do all of the meal prep, and in some cases actually feeding the individual. Just a few notes about these home-based services. It demonstrates the need for consistency when a certain type is offered across most waivers. Right now, each waiver has a different structure for services designed to serve the same purpose, to assist individuals, as we talked about, with those activities of daily living or those instrumental activities of daily living. By making these services consistent across all waivers, we not only ensure equal access for all participants, regardless of what their disability is, it reduces confusion and administrative burden amongst our providers, and will allow providers to provide more services across the waivers versus being specialized in only providing services in one waiver. Exceptional supports. Right now, currently, SCL is the only waiver that allows for an acuity-based rate or an exceptional support process. All waivers have individuals who require more care or a higher acuity of care than their peers in the same waiver. In addition to requesting exceptional rate, there are some services that the individual may ask for additional units of services. In the case of rate, it is up to double the regular rate. We recommend and plan to look in depth at the current exceptional supports protocol. We want to evaluate expanding a similar concept to all the waivers. A key to understanding and making this process effective as possible is considering each recipient holistically. What natural supports do they have? What additional services are they receiving? And just to give you all an example, I did an audit where an individual in her 20s was requesting exceptional supports for personal assistance provided through PDS. The rate that was being requested was up to $48 an hour for the existing employee to provide the existing services. Now, this individual did have multiple challenging behaviors, including biting, hitting, scratching, pulling the hair of both the employees and herself. At times, she refused to comply with care, including purposely using the bathroom on herself, refusing to exit or board a vehicle, refusing to get cleaned up. But when I reviewed the documentation provided, this individual was not receiving any types of behavior supports, either through the waiver or state plan. The individual was unable to adequately communicate her needs, yet there had been no effort to evaluate her for a communication device. The notes that were submitted by the primary employee were so misspelled that they were difficult to understand. At times, I couldn't even decide what the word was meant to be. There was no documentation of strategies that were employed or notes of any triggers that may present prior to behavior beginning. And while it's completely understandable that it may be necessary to pay an employee to provide services to an individual, just doubling the rate does not solve the actual problem or do justice to the participant. Without actually looking more into the situation and giving the employee tools to be successful, where are we going to be a year from now when the $48 an hour, that hasn't made a difference? The employee is still getting hit and kicked and bit. All the same behaviors are still there. Is the request going to be, then again, we need more money? So money cannot always be the root of all of the problem or the solution for all of the problems. I'll look now at case management and support broker and some of the rate disparities here. This service is reimbursed on a monthly level. We have allowed through Appendix K additional units a month. Typically, the case management is only able to be billed once a month. The expectations of a case manager are the same across waivers. So we expect the same thing from this HCB case manager that's making $100 a month that we do from this ABI case manager that's getting $434 a month. This case manager is not only responsible for waiver services and leading team meetings and helping to build the plan, but options counseling and facilitating connections of services to meet other needs. For example, if there's a problem with utilities, they're responsible for helping to connect them to the appropriate resources. If they need durable medical equipment, they're responsible for helping to access that information and getting connected with those services. The support broker services are really the exact same as the case manager. Their responsibilities are the same, with a few different responsibilities in that they coordinate with the financial management agency as well as with the participant or their participant directed services representative to make sure that participant directed services are going well. Are there any employment needs? A lot of times the case manager takes on the responsibility of helping to track when employment requirements are due. Has the individual had their annual TB screening? Are there copies of insurance, vehicle insurance on file if they're transporting the individual? Nursing services are only offered in 2 waivers. ABI-LTC, we have nursing services. It's a more time-limited service. It's more for catheter care or injectable medications. Model 2 is provided by nursing or respiratory staff. It's very technical. It's very specialized. These staff are with individuals from anywhere to 8 to 16 hours a day. They monitor ventilator settings. They monitor oxygenation. They may change trachs and dressings. They may administer G-tube feedings, injectable medicines or medicines through the G-tube. And in addition to the skilled services, they are the ones that are providing the personal care services for that individual. So there's not a home health aide that's coming in to do the bath or to help potentially with incontinence care or changing the bed. It is the nurse or the respiratory therapist that is on duty for that day that is providing that care. The similar service for nursing is also provided during private duty nursing, and it's not in the table, but the rate for private duty nursing that's reimbursed to the agencies is $36.60 an hour. So you can see the vast difference between the rates. Right now, we're only serving about 35 individuals on the Model 2 waiver program. We can serve up to 100. However, the agencies aren't able to get qualified staff for those rates to provide care for those individuals. So how do we set new rates? What do we need to do? A rate study is foundational. The previous rate study included 107 total responses, 93 from service providers and 14 from case management providers. All 120 counties in the state were represented. The lowest numbers providers providing a response who serve a specific county was 3. The highest number was 30 from a county. Providers are concentrated in urban areas, and the concentration of providers aligns really with the distribution of the population in the state. We also used economic data for the Kentucky Center for Statistics to analyze regional wage variation among workers. And during the first rate study, feedback was requested throughout. A pilot survey was done before release of the full survey. There were 2 webinars outlining instructions and opportunities provided for questions and one-to-one sessions. And we also extended the date for the survey to be turned in, I believe, 2 times. Do we need another rate study? Yes. Why do we need it? What will change? COVID is a big part of that. The change of the makeup in providers, the delivery of services, the confusion over some of the responses in the process before. Our goal will be to be transparent and share information. There was a concern that I've heard multiple times about the previous rate stakeholder group being asked to not share information. While there was a good reason behind that to help decrease confusion and to not put them into a place where they were asked questions that they didn't have the information to answer, it led to an appearance of information being hidden or secret information. We want to provide maximal opportunity for training and support during the completion of the survey. We also really want to look at all of our services, the definition and the utilization. Are there services that really aren't getting utilized that we may want to change, and the money that's dedicated to those could be used to increase for some of the other services? We want to look at an option to develop rates based on the acuity of the individual. This is kind of akin to the exceptional supports, but on a more grand scale. That if you have an individual that is more complex and requires higher care, that there is a higher rate for caring for that individual versus someone that maybe just needs kind of that supervision and someone to be there to say, hey, make sure you go take a bath, or let's, figure out what we're going to go to the grocery and get, those types of service, versus if you have someone that is physically having to lift someone and provide that hands-on support and carry out the task for the individual. We also want to expand services and requirements across waivers. This will allow our providers to expand who they serve to. Right now, based on each regulation, documentation may differ. Of course, you saw the rates differ. So making things consistent where possible would allow us to increase our provider base. Our federal rules and guidance on rate setting, on rate setting. So we have really 3 key things, and I won't read all of those numbers to you, but there is a portion of the Social Security Act, a portion of federal regulations, as well as our 1915C home and community-based waiver instructions and technical guide that direct us on how we are to establish rates and how we document those. The key to highlight amongst all of them is that payments are consistent. Oh, sorry, forgot to turn. Payments are consistent with efficiency, economy, and quality of care, and that they are sufficient enough to enlist providers. So to break that down a little bit, the rate methodologies can incorporate that difficulty of care factor, as we were just talking about. They can vary by geographic location. We don't see this employed by many providers today, although we did find in a recent wage survey that we did have some providers that were changing their rate based on where in the state they live. And they can differ based on the service delivery method or the provider type. The key is that we must clearly explain any rate methodology variation and the reason for the variation. So we must describe the policy and methods used to set rates for each service. We must document those payment rates and make them available to CMS upon request. And actually, as part of the waiver amendments that we have to submit to CMS for approval, our payment methodology must be documented, as well as what the individual rates are for each service. We have to ensure appropriate audit of records. We want to have a monitoring plan to assure the effectiveness of the rates. That rate setting methodology is to be reviewed every 5 years and notify the public of any rate changes. So at any time that we change the rate or a rate for a service or a type of service, it gets documented in 2 specific places. It's documented in our Kentucky administrative regulations, as well as being documented in the waiver amendments. Both of those carry a requirement of a public response period, as well as response to that public response. It's those public comments. So what are our recommendations? The first thing, and I believe you all have heard me say this over and over again, it's highlighted in our stories. Remember the people that we serve and where the money goes. Service definitions are technical. They're stating participants get help with activities of daily living, but it's easy to forget what that means. These caregivers see participants in their most vulnerable moments. They play an intimate role in their lives. They do everything from helping someone to bathe and dress to helping them eat. These caregivers are also tasked with helping these individuals reach their goals and dreams. Paid caregivers really are more than employees. They become supporters. They become family and friends. Each person served is unique and deserves a well-trained, well-paid, quality caregiver to help them live the life they chose. I would like to be able to say, give me X million dollars and we can fix the problem. Do I know what that number is? Do I feel like it will solve all of the problems? Short term, maybe. Long term, I really doubt it. This is a systemic problem. Opinions differ, and I know there are several political points of view on the root cause. If one person is one person more right than another, maybe, most likely not. And I think we can agree that it's a combination of many factors, many that existed before the pandemic and were just highlighted or made more problematic by the pandemic. Anyone can drive down the road, visit any fast food or retail establishment, and see the now hiring signs, the text to apply, the banners listing benefits, pay every day, vacation. And while we agree rate changes are needed, simply increasing the rate paid to providers without investigating the root cause and factors needed to remedy the true problem is like putting bubble gum on the hole in a bucket. Once the pressure becomes too much or the stickiness goes away, the bucket's going to start leaking again. While we, with the cabinet, agree changes are needed in reimbursement and actions are needed to address and support providers immediately to address workforce issues that have increased or brought more to the forefront related to COVID. The previous slide outlines the federal guidance on rate setting, as well as the broad overview of our recommendations. In this next portion of the presentation, I'm going to broadly address how we are going to use funding provided by the American Rescue Plan to address immediate needs. So I will stop there if you would like and can answer questions before we go on to talk about briefly the American Rescue Plan Act and the enhanced funding that we're going to receive through that.
Okay, thank you, Pam. First of all, Senator Meredith's got a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair Riley. I'm looking at your slide 22, your DMS rate recommendations, and your first note there is update rate methodology and reimbursement rates. I'm always thrilled when we're all in agreement on something, and honestly, we are on this one. But my concern is what's the timeline for this? Because there's a sense of urgency, and I think going through this entire process and collecting information and getting federal approval and moving and so forth, how long will this take?
The length of time, I cannot answer. When it is going to start, I have a better answer for. As part of the money we're receiving through the ARPA funds, we will be using to kick off another rate study. And then until we actually speak to, the experts that would be doing that, to know how long it will actually take to document that. It also depends on the response that we get from the providers. If we have good engagement from the providers and we have responses from the providers, it will obviously go faster than if we are, like we have to do many times, begging for responses and feedback from the providers. Once that rate study is done, then what will happen is we will modify the regulation and we'll modify the waiver amendments with any whatever the changes come out of that rate study.
Well, given that we're all in agreement that this needs to be done, shouldn't we be promoting that to providers now to prepare them for it so that they can hopefully respond on a timely basis? I would think if we're waiting to do that, that just slows the entire process. And a question in addition to that is, what kicks that off? I mean, do we have to include this in the proposed budget for next year, or?
So we have, I guess, to answer your first question, we have already been talking about it. We've done 2 informal surveys already with the providers, and what will kick this off is the American Rescue funds and us being able to kickstart using those. But this is our top priority because so many things are built on this process and the rates. I'll talk about a couple other activities related to American Rescue Plan Act that we are hoping will provide immediate relief.
Well, Pam, before you do that, let me ask you about these consultants that we need to prepare this. Are we preparing RFPs now to award those contracts?
We have been working with procurement, yes, prior to even submitting our American Rescue Plan narrative. And I had sent a request and had not got anything back yet right before this meeting for an update on where we were. But we have been working on them actually for some time, even as soon as we knew that we were going to be able to use some of the money through the enhanced Fmap through the ARPA.
So the RFP has not been released yet. We're still in development phase. We're relying on procurement to finish that up. Then will it be a 30, 60, 90 day window?
It will be, so it is a very short turnaround time. So the shortest, so it would be we're looking at would be a 30-day turnaround time. We're also looking at other options if there is the potential that we could do. So there's two paths going really. One is the RFP that has been written and is in, the process of all of the approvals that it has to go through. And then we also looked at the option, do we have either a university partnership, a different partner that we could bring on quickly that would still meet the laws of procurement. I think you've heard me say I don't look good in orange, keep me out of procurement jail. So we are following all of those processes that we have to, but realize that this is critical and the immediate implementation of these activities is essential to us being successful.
Well, as co-chair of Government Contract Review, I can assure you we can keep you out of orange. I don't think we've ever sent anybody to prison yet, even though I would like to on a couple of occasions. But it still concerns me the timeline on this, that literally, really, I don't see this being completed by the end of this next calendar year. And again, I'm assuming you're going to say they're going to use ARPA funds to kind of plug the hole and then solidify this when we get the study done, but that puts us in the 22-24 budget cycle. Is that right?
It would be, so yes. So if the target is to, we're realistically middle of October now. So target would be at the latest to get that kicked off beginning of the year. If providers are ready and are waiting and will respond quickly. I would like to say that by the end of next year that we could be looking at having things approved in regulation and in the waiver to implement. I wish, I could shake my magic 8 ball and say, okay, this is what we'll be able to do it by this date, but there's just the variable of the responses and people providing information that kind of throws a wrench into that.
Well, I don't think you have to shake your 8 ball. I think I've got my own 8 ball, and just based on practical experience, I just don't see this being completed on a very timely basis. But I know I'm jumping ahead of myself and you probably, but it appears that we intend to use ARPA funds to plug this hole. But in order to solidify this forward, it's not going to happen, it looks like, before 22-24, and that's a little bit disconcerting. I'm concerned about that, particularly since we don't know what the price tag is. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Meredith. Pam, let me ask a question.
Okay.
Would it be possible to use ARPA funds to fund an immediate interim rate increases while we go through this study?
Okay, so that is allowable. However, you have to have a documented rate methodology in place to show what made you decide to increase the rates that the way that you did and to what extent that you did. There is also the barrier that so if you increase the rates through the ARPA funds and the new rates are not in place prior to those rates, are us being able to spend those additional funds, having to then take money back from providers, which is something we really don't want to be, in the position of, we're going to give you this, it's going to last for, X amount of months, but we may have to take it back or, decrease you back down to the original rate at the end of that.
I'm not sure we're allowed to do that. I'm sorry, we're not allowed to do that. I apologize. Senator Adams.
Thank you, Pam, for your testimony today, even though it's quite a head scratcher for me. And part of the reason it's a head scratcher for me is we had the ARPA guidelines out in April, if I'm correct, April of 2021. We had the guidance issued. We're now in October. And I'm concerned that there is a time limit on when we are allowed to expend these ARPA dollars. What is the expiration of being allowed to spend these ARPA dollars?
It is March 31st, 2024. And while the guidelines were out, we did not receive approval from CMS. Before you can enact anything with the dollars, you had to have an initial approval from CMS on your spending plan. And we have just received that in the last couple of weeks.
Okay, so the approval of that CMS spending plan, can you release a copy of that to the committee?
Yes, so the spending plan is on our website. I can send that over, and then I can send a copy of the letter that we received from CMS with the details.
Okay, and then you also discussed that you had 2 surveys with providers already. Can you submit to the committee those 2 surveys that you've currently done with providers?
I will caution that they are very basic surveys that were done through like the Google tool. So there is some high level summary data. There's a lot of just of comments, but I'm happy to release those. But just with you all knowing that it is that they were just very basic targeted questions that we were asking, really to understand how employees were they employing mostly contractors, how were they recruiting, what specific, how many people did they employ, what types of things did they look at when determining their rate. But I'm more than happy to share those.
Thank you. And then another thing I would like to impress upon the cabinet during this conversation is that it is important that providers cooperate, but if there's anything that this committee has expressed to the cabinet, that providers need a rate increase. And so they are ready for a rate increase, and it's not contingent upon whether they cooperate or not. I think we have plenty to go by in order to come up with this rate methodology and get some relief in the hands of our providers. I mean, it's just absolutely critical that we get these rate increases as quickly as possible, particularly with the federal dollars. And I look forward to looking at the information you send over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Adams. I don't think we have any more questions on this thing before we go to Pam's next. Sharon, I would recommend that you talk to one of the members afterwards for your question you've got. Feel free to do that, okay? Thank you. So Pam, let's go ahead and go to the next section on federal medical assistance percentage enhanced. Yes. Go ahead, Pam.
Just a little high-level information on what the Fmap is. And I realize some of you, this may be very familiar, but just for the benefit of those that really, when they hear that, don't understand what that is. So it is the federal funding that we receive from CMS for our 1915C HCBS program. Per federal regulations, it can be between 50 and 83% In federal fiscal year 2019, our Fmap rate was 71.67%. It's based on each state's capita income. The lower a state's income, the higher the Fmap. So what is it that we mean when we say the enhanced Fmap? So the American Rescue Plan includes a temporary increase of 10% based on certain HCBS expenses, and that was outlined in the letter that they provided. We refer that to as the enhanced Fmap. You may have also heard enhanced Fmap referred to the 6.2 increase that was received through the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That began in January 2020 and will continue until the public health emergency ends. What are we required to do in order to utilize these funds that came from the American Rescue Act? We had to submit that spending plan to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, so CMS, and those funds must be expended by March 31st of 2024. This is a high-level allocation of what we did with the money. And again, that spending plan is posted on our website, and I will send that over so that you all have another copy along with the approval. Workforce development, you'll see got the biggest chunk, which is 35%. So that includes immediate support, incentive and recovery payments, what we can do for workforce growth, looks at developing a central employee registry that will make hiring easier for employees. It will make a central place for pre-employment screenings to live, if you will, so that there's not any of this, well, did you have a TB screening? Did you have your drug test? Did you have your background check? That information will live somewhere, which will make onboarding quicker for employees and for participants that want to participant direct their services. Looking at career ladder and advancement opportunities. We want to improve the ease of access. So that right now is at about a 30%. This is where you're going to see the rate study, looking at the services, looking at the service offerings, looking at the assessment change. We've all talked about right now how we have multiple different assessment tools. This is going to look at implementing a validated assessment tool that addresses all of the populations versus having multiple assessment tools. This looks at the wait list and what we can do to address that, as well as some one-time service offerings. Now that includes things that we don't traditionally pay for, like some of the home repairs, as well as things like that are more expensive items. So maybe like some dental work, some glasses, hearing aids, things that are covered through goods and services, but if an individual uses them, then their entire budget or their entire allotment for goods and services is gone for that entire waiver year. Tools and transformation, that again is really targeted to, and that's 10%, it's targeted to technology changes, things to make the work for the providers more efficient. One thing that we actually have started on even prior to ARPA, it was on the list and we've started on, is a way to import records from individual employees' electronic health records, those service notes, to import them directly into MWMA so that we didn't have providers potentially documenting in two different places or having to download a copy from their health record and then upload it in MWMA. So really to have that sharing of information. There was a small portion, 5%, that's dedicated to project support. So that will help us to manage timelines, manage the project plan, manage the quarterly reporting that has to go to CMS. Again, our spending plan, the current narrative, is on our website. We are posting materials up as soon as we have revised materials, and we will be starting town halls in the next in the next month by November to actually start having those interactions with providers, participants, and other stakeholders to get their feedback. So the timeline, for this is we have to respond to their request for more information. You will see when you get a copy of that letter, there were a few questions they asked us. These were not anything we did not predict, as their directions for submitting the original plan was for it to be very broad. And there were not any states that received full initial approval. Every state has went through that additional information process. While there's no deadline, we are finalizing that, and we'll be sending our responses to CMS by the end of this week. And we are beginning to work on the approved initiatives.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Senator Meredith.
I'll put this up here to show that there's a couple of different ways that if you want to share with your all's constituents, or that anyone's watching, that to be able to get a hold of us. So we have our regular phone number. People can use that public comment email, which has been shared quite a bit, as well as there is actually a feedback form that is out there listed at that link that will allow individuals to provide feedback.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Senator Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Pam, I'm looking at your slide on 24, and just want to make sure we have our numbers correct, that the base FMAP rate, we're actually getting a decrease in it, 0.0589, I believe, that goes in effect 2023.
I will follow up with Steve on those numbers to make sure that I have those right. Now, until that's the
point I'm making, Pam. Don't mean to interrupt you, but just so we understand the baseline of this, right now we've got our current 71.67% and 10% on top of that, plus the 6.2%.
Plus the 6.2, correct?
Right.
Yes.
But I just want to make sure we understand going forward that after 2024 that goes away, but we also are going to have a slight reduction in our FMAP, or again I think it's 0.0589. So there is a slight reduction there. Just I want to make sure that's not overlooked. I don't think it's going to be significant in dollars, but when you're short dollars to begin with, that can be significant. So just make sure we're being transparent on this. But another thing, I want to commend you folks on looking at the bureaucracy of this thing. And we had testimony in Appropriations Revenue last week, I think it was, that from Kentucky Hospital Association and I believe KMA, that one of the major impediments to keeping people within the field is the bureaucracy and the work environment. And we need really a concentrated effort on reducing the paperwork involved with these programs. So I appreciate you doing that. But Mr. Chair, I really think we need to have another task force this next year that really focuses on reducing the bureaucracy associated with the Medicaid program, because it is a major impediment to keeping people in the field across the board, no matter what role you play in healthcare. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for those comments, Senator Meredith. Anybody else have any questions for Pam? If not, Pam, thank you for your testimony today, and we'll be talking later. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
At this time, we have the waiver services and reimbursement rate changes, recommendations for changes from perspective of providers. So for this, we have Steve Shannon and Amy Stade, Jane Stahl, and Kelly Upchurch. Could you all come up to the...
I think they're going to do one by one.
Okay.
Jane's on Zoom.
Okay, Jane's on Zoom. Okay, so we want to go...
I am.
Okay,
I'm
so
here.
let's go Jane first. All right, Jane, go ahead and go first.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen with you guys. So I'm not going to take a lot of time. Most of you probably have recognized me. I've spoken before the committees before. My name's Jane Stahl. I'm the Executive Director of Nerve Restorative. We provide services under the brain injury waiver. You have some information just about the waivers in general, but I'm going to cut to the chase and just kind of look at some of our challenges. Actually, this challenge. Currently, Nerve Restorative Kentucky, who serves about 250 waiver participants, we are currently sitting at 124 open DSP positions. And that's just to provide the minimum care that we need to do. We have 12 openings in our still clinicians. We have 3 nursing openings. every time we lose an employee, it's costing us more to get them replaced. Our overtime average in August was 33.9%, and our highest overtime rate in the Louisville market this last September, just a few weeks ago, was 80% overtime. We are covering our direct service professional shifts with our skilled clinicians, averaging about 1,000 hours a month to do that, and another 1,500 a month with other administrative type staff. Any way you look at it, it's not sustainable, and it's just not. So, kind of, what we want to see, we need to see some short-term immediate relief with funding. Something has to be done, especially with the ARPA money that's there. We need to see it. Then we need to look at the 2022 budget and take that money and implement an increase. We're asking for a 25% increase across all waiver service lines, except for the residential services. And we're asking to be able to keep what is in the SCL and the ABI residential services now at that 50% increase without putting any type of attendance exclusions with it. Long-term funding has to be obviously addressed as well. And we would like to include in the 2022 budget that we do try to find some long-term solutions. Regular costs for living adjustments. It's been 15 years, I think, since ABI waivers had increases. Regular wage analysis, and again, funding so that we can support a robust and clinical and qualified workforce that can provide the true person-centered care that we want to provide for our waiver participants. And I think now Amy might be going to talk.
Okay, thank you, Jane. And it looks like maybe Kelly is going to go next. Go ahead, Kelly.
Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Appreciate the task force giving me a chance. My name is Kelly Upchurch. I'm the legislative chair for the Kentucky Association of Adult Day Centers. I've spoken in front of this committee several times. One time, and spent 18 months on the Navigate redesign. So I have a significant investment in the 1915C redesign. The information I'm going to give you today is information you've already had, and I think I won't speak for my colleagues, but I think they're going to have a very similar message that I'm going to give you as well. For the background, adult day health care providers, there's 118 in the state. That's a loose number. I know that at least 4 of those centers have already closed and won't be reopening. 8 others told me they doubted their ability. They're shuttered now and doubted their ability to reopen. And I got about 15 kickbacks on my emails for a mass email. I keep getting those, so I don't know if those folks are even around. So you could be looking at easily a 30% reduction, maybe even 35% reduction in adult day healthcare services across the state. And again, please keep in mind that that's just an estimate, just because of the scenario that we're in. Of those 118 adult days, providers, we serve over 10,000 patients statewide. You understand the services that Adult Day does provide. I heard some testimony earlier about, thank you so much for bringing that up. I know they always hear that from me, but from a third party, that's quite a testimony. But Adult Day provides skilled nursing care for frail, elderly, and disabled folks. That's one of the few waiver programs. I know Director Smith had a slide she skipped, but Adult Day is one of those providers that provides skilled nursing care. We do that based on what that participant's needs might be, from something as simple as filling a med box to IV medications, wound care, trach care, catheterization care, you name it. Basically, we will do that in the adult day for one flat capitated fee, and including in that not just medical services, but you get a meal, 2 meals, and snacks during the day. A lot of socialization. It's the only program that's only purpose is to be a safety net for those frail, elderly, and disabled folks, to allow them to live in the community and do the things that they would like to do instead of being torn from their home and moved to a living situation where they're not familiar and they don't want to be. Anyway, the presentation that I have basically is a watered down version of what I gave you last time, but I'll start with definitions. If you recall in my testimony before, we talked about definitions. I heard Director Smith talking about redesign. Folks, the devil's in the detail with redesign on definitions. One of the services that Adult Day provides is attendant care services. When the Navigant study was over and there was recommendations made regarding attendant care services, there was an introduction of a new definition of attendant care services that would have eliminated services for most of the patients that Adult Day Healthcare provides services for. One of those things that was in that definition was going back to an antiquated version of attendant care, eliminating that as a service that we provide, but including just personal care and homemaking services. Now you say, oh, well, that's pretty good. You get personal care and homemaking services. The problem is that there was a limited number of hours that person could receive those services. They gave 40 hours for personal care service and 10 hours for homemaking services. Well, nobody takes a bath for 40 hours a week. They just don't. So in essence, it would be cutting services to a participant without actually cutting services. That other 10 hours that we're talking about would have been the most packed 10 hours you have ever seen, because in that time you would have to do the grocery shopping, you would have to do the laundry, clean the house, prepare the meals, do all those things that take participants to the doctor's office, go get their medications. All of those things we would have had to pack in a 10-hour period of time for a week, and this is not possible. So we like the current definition. It is working. The current definition of attendant care is working right now, and I know that there might have to be some tweaks to make it universal across all waivers, but we would certainly like the task force to consider making a recommendation to keep those services and maintain those services that are in that 907 KAR 7:010 definition. It works well. It serves our participants well. It gives them the flexibility to say, I need this more than this. The other antiquated way does not give them the option of doing that. It's just a straight hourly shot controlled by the process. So we'd ask the task force to adopt that 907 KAR 7:010 language that's currently under regulation. Attended care and adult day health care, we would ask that committee members, I've heard the testimony. You've heard the testimony. Senator Meredith, you and I have talked some, and I don't know another way to say that we have to have a rate increase. I don't know another way of sharing that with you. I know that we don't know the true numbers of where the state is at. We don't know we don't know where our budget is or where it's going to be and where that money is going to come from. And Chairman Riley, I certainly understand that as well, and I'm sympathetic to that. But what I'm sharing with you now is that adult day to survive has got to have a rate increase. We have to have it. I don't know what we're going to look like if we don't have it, and we're not going to be able to wait to 2024 to get it. It's just my heart sank into my chest when I heard that testimony just a while ago. We won't survive if we have to wait that long. We won't survive. If you recall, on the 24th, I testified, and some of you that were on that committee, in front of the Human Resources Committee, Senator Meredith's chair of that committee, testified of the rate increase that we would need. And we asked for a 10% rate increase, and that is in addition to those federal monies that are currently out there in the Fmap money as well. But 10% is not even, since our last 5 year, it's been 5 years since we had a rate increase. That's not even 2% of a COLA. for that 5-year period of time. So we're still losing ground, but it will at least keep our head above the water. You're going to hear some testimony from my colleagues in SEL and other programs. They're going to be asking you the same. And please know that our state association supports our other brothers and sisters in the home community-based waiver program in a rate increase. I know that it's different for all folks, but in this case, I would be remiss in not sharing with you that this is something that is not. I don't approach this committee mildly. I don't approach budget review subcommittee with frivolous every 2-year request. That's just not what we do. We consider ourselves partners. We're delivering services to real people in the Commonwealth, and they have a real need right now for that service. And without a rate increase, they're not going to get it. I appreciate the committee's time, and I will entertain questions.
Senator Meredith.
I appreciate your testimony always. I know you've been here many, many occasions, and I truly believe in the endurance of the human spirit, and I hope you find the hope. And one of my favorite stories in history is Robert de Bruce, the King of Scotland. Do you know that story where he had fought the English time and time again, and he was hiding in a cave and watched a spider spin a web, and on the 7th time the spider was successful, so he took that as a sign. So if you've seen the spiders out your way, watch them closely. But
yes, sir.
In all seriousness,
I will.
I think you've got the attention of this committee. We know what a challenge it is, and we want to try to resolve this problem. And I can assure you, I think we will fight hard for you. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly and Amy.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. So, Amy and Steve, both of you, make sure that you introduce yourself before you give your testimony for the record. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Stade. I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Association of Private Providers. And I invited Steve up here with me because what I'm going to say, he builds off of it and is going to present a coalition recommendation. The coalition is a coalition of 1915C waiver providers consisting of the Kentucky Association of Private Providers, Steve's association, Mr. Upchurch's association, and then Neurorestorative, who testified first. The four of us got together and came up with recommendations for the committee that we would respectfully like for you to consider. So just so you understand the order of how we're gonna go. No, you're fine. Yeah. Okay. Again, my name is Amy Stade. I am with the Kentucky Association of Private Providers. Here are the core issues we've talked about so far over the task force. We started out talking about our regulatory scheme. We've talked about program limitations. We've talked about the wait list. And here's really where it gets interesting. To meaningfully address the wait list, we have to address our workforce. To meaningfully address our workforce, we have to address wages. And to address all of those things, we have to address the reimbursement rates. And we have to do it today. We can't wait until July. We can't wait until 2022. We have to address these issues today because providers are actively closing down. Providers are closing up services. You heard testimony at the last task force, two of my members that were sitting with me, about how they're closing up a program in Owensboro. We've recently gotten word that at least 5 residential providers are closing up residential services. And let's remember, the residential component of the Supports for Community Living Waiver is the key component. These individuals, if they don't have a place to live, they can't exist on the waiver. They can't be on the SCL waiver if they don't have a place to live. And the other option is costly. It's institutionalization or nursing home care, which isn't necessarily appropriate for someone who's been thriving in a community-based setting. So again, all of these things lead us to Kentucky must immediately invest in our 1915C waivers. So we understand that the General Assembly can only act when it's in session. We're obviously in an interim right now, but we need immediate funding. When I say tomorrow, I do not exaggerate. We need immediate funding. We're seeing programs close every single day. We're actively not taking referrals. There are individuals out there who need services, who cannot get services or find caregivers because we need to immediate funding. So what we're proposing is, as you've heard, the Department for Medicaid Services, the Cabinet for Health and Family Services is will get about $500 million, $500 million, in increased federal match from the American Rescue Plan. These funds can only be used for HCBS services. So these funds can only be used for the services we're talking about today. We would respectfully ask that the Cabinet for Health and Family Services work with you all to immediately allocate a portion of those funds to implement rate increases. Immediate life-saving rate increases. And we don't have to call them a rate increase. We can call them a hero payment. We can call them a rescue payment. We can call them whatever we want to payment, whatever we want to call it. But I cannot stress enough that immediate action is beyond necessary. We are in a crisis right now. We're about ready to be in a catastrophe. What we've determined, and Steve will talk a lot more about this because he is much better with numbers than I am. We've determined that we need a 25% rate increase. And I want to be clear, even though my advocacy covers the supports for community living and the Michelle P. waiver, we think that this is necessary for all of our waivers. Okay, this 25% rate increase, and Steve, again, will be able to give you specific dollar amounts of what that means. This gets us to a $15 median DSP wage, which is the baseline. That is the base of what these employees should be making. That is the minimum increase that we need to compete, to even compete. That rate increase would apply to all waivers and all services, with one exception. As we've established, right now, ABI and SCL residential programs are currently receiving a 50% increased rate. I believe it was Senator Meredith on this committee who noted, why don't we just make that permanent? Well, I thought that was a great idea, and so do our residential providers. Our residential providers, we've seen throughout COVID that 50% increased rate is the bare minimum of what 24-hour residential services need to stay in business. And so we would ask that Appendix K rate for SCL and ABI residential services be made permanent after our Appendix K expires, which that's yet to be seen when that will happen, without day service attendance exclusion. So right now, that rate can only be billed if an individual doesn't attend any sort of day services. And we would just ask that 50% increased rate be the rate. Again, we have more specific numbers that can tell you how much this will cost with that proposal. The fourth thing is that the attendant care definition, as Mr. Upchurch just explained, it's very important that it stay the way that it is today. I'm not the authority on it, but many of my members do provide that service, and it's important that it continue to stay the way that it is today. We understand that these ARPA monies are a short-term solution, and we consider that to be a rescue solution. That's what keeps us afloat until we can get in here and actually come up with the long-term solution. We love the idea of going back and looking at establishing a sound rate structure. We think any sound rate structure would need regular cost of living adjustments, so we don't have to come in here every 4 years and have this conversation. A regular wage analysis, so that we know that our employees are making what they need to make to not only so they can afford to live, but to make these jobs enticing. MIT recently did a study saying that the living wage that would be for one adult who has one child would be about $23 an hour to live in Kentucky. That's our living wage. Many of the employees of these agencies make under the federal poverty limit, and they themselves utilize Medicaid for their health care. If we raise wages, those individuals will be able to afford, our employees will be able to afford their own private health care. Just another thing is that we need funding. We need a permanent funding solution outside of our rescue solution to support a robust and qualified workforce in true person-centered care. In order to establish that, we would suggest that we renew this task force for the 2022 interim to really dive into, especially some of the questions that Senator Meredith, you asked of Ms. Smith related to rate studies, methodologies, etc. I think that if this task force dedicates itself the entire interim, we can solve that problem. Unfortunately, we've had to, this interim, we've had to shift our focus from finding long-term solutions to just surviving. And I think that if we extend into next interim, we can really come up with those funding solutions. So I have one more slide. And it is the group recommendations. That Steve will talk about. Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I'll go ahead and start. Because it's going to feed right into what I have, and I have a PowerPoint, and I don't necessarily.
Steve, you could turn your mic on.
Thought I had. No, I didn't. I wish that light wasn't green. It'd be better for me. But wishes were horses. Why would a beggar ride? I'd pick food in the job. But either way, I want to talk about what you're going to see in terms of the dollars. But first of all, you heard about people who have exceptional needs today. We've talked about this for the last 2 years. Talked to people with exceptional behavioral support needs. They need those services. We've talked about that. Is anything new? We've heard this repeatedly. Frankie, who testified, what a powerful job. I'd skip the Constitution, pass that bill today. But he came here with an attendant. Someone came with him to help him, right? Pretty simple. Representative Kirk McCormick, Voc Rehab. Need jobs, right? Good stuff. So I'm going to tell you what it is. First of all, you've heard all that story. Second, we need people now. I mean, my message is more money now. My initial impulse was have one slide, more money now. Like crossword puzzle, I could have done another crossword puzzle. But it's more money now. I'm going to say that several times. I'll throw an SMI waiver at some point, too. June 21st, 2021, Commissioner Lee, and she's known I'm going to say this, she testified before this task force. Her final slide was, how can the General Assembly help? Her first bullet point was funding. And her message is, additional money is needed to improve HCB programs for current participants and expand availability to all Kentuckians needing supports. It's not a secret. It's not a secret. More money now is the answer. So, what's the number for more money now? Okay, we have ARPA funds we can do now. Understand the budget session. We can't wait to finalize this calendar year 22. Go on. That's the 25-26 budget is what we'd be talking about at that point. We'd be in trouble. So we looked at it, and I went back to the Navigant report. Now, I'm not saying the Navigant report is the greatest document on waiver services, but it has a detailed rate study that you heard some talk about from Pam Smith. 93 providers, okay? 14 for case management. So I looked at that. One, it is pre-COVID. The world has changed. It is still pre-COVID, right? Talked about those services. I want to know the root cause of how we got there. But root cause analysis takes a while. We need to act now. So the next thing I want to tell you about, and this report from Navigant, and I got a copy. I can, someone can make a copy if you haven't seen it. It's 2019, so it's 2 years old. Data was probably taken end of calendar year 18, beginning calendar year 19. But let's talk about the two largest services in that waiver briefly. Total expenditure was $857 million. 70% of that, 31% for residential, so how about those? 29% for in-home supports. 70% of that $857 million went to where people live. If we can't staff that, what happens to those people? That is the compelling message for me today. What happens? They're not going to have adequate supports. Where do they go? We heard. ICFs can't handle. They can't gear up. Nursing homes can't do this. What's going to happen? That's the real concern. We need an answer. And again, health, safety, welfare, and quality outcomes. The goal is to be able to be selective in the DSP hiring process. And I'm going to speak unashamedly. We're not always very selective, but that's what we need to get to. So 70% of our dollars go to those two services, $600 million. So the Navigant report, what's the answer? How do we get to a number that you all can at least think about and start to digest? The DSP median salary in this report was $11.26 for Kentucky. So the median salary, hourly rate, $11.26. We've heard repeatedly $15. Median, half below, half above, right? That's just median. I don't know the range, I don't know the average. But what if we just say, as an assumption to determine the amount of money we need to fund, we increase that median from $11.26 per hour to, as my friend Amy said, $15 rate for the median, okay? That's a $3.74 increase. 33% jump. It's a big number. Increased compensation by 33%. And the median's important because there's parts of the state it's much more difficult to hire people and keep people. So if you set a flat rate, there are going to be winners and losers. I'm going to promise you that. And I've said this before. The winners never call you. You all, right? The losers will call. The winners will not call. You do the median, the people who are in this industry, Senator Meredith, can figure out what the salary needs to be. So you shift it up 33%. Big jump. So the median goes, this is in my PowerPoint. I'll talk you through. You can look at it. All right, the second assumption I've made today. In our industry, DSPs are the lifeblood. 75% of all costs are DSP related. Okay, you heard Pam Smith talk about buildings, overhead. We have executive directors, we have directors of programs, we have accountants, we have buildings, we have roofs, all that stuff. It's okay for us to make a little money too. That's the other piece. Not for profit, it's a tax status, not a business model. So 75% is DSP related. 25% is non-DSP. Not very sophisticated math, is it? 75 and 25 gets you to your 100%. I've already said, if you increase the median to $15, you go up 33% on the DSP cost. Okay? So that 75 goes up to 100, right? A third of 75 is 25, goes up to 100. You still have your non-DSP costs at 125. That's how we get to 25%. Whether it's good math, good assumptions, the math is correct, whether you accept the assumptions that the median needs to go up to 15, I think it does to be competitive in the labor marketplace because we are not today, need to be competitive. 2, do people believe our DSP costs are 75%? I've been saying that for a long time. I never had this conversation with Amy till 2.5 hours ago. She uses 70, 80%. It's 75%. It's in that range. Pick a number, right? It's all formula. So you do that. So you have those assumptions. And the goal is to be selective. The goal is people with higher needs. Maybe you can pay more money for that staff. There's a radical approach. Develop people with expertise to meet the behavioral health needs of many people in waivers. Pretty good. First 2 women that testified. Again, I could go home after that. They need DSPs who are competent and well-trained. So overall expenses by 25%. This is where it gets a little difficult. But the residential piece up 50%. Residential, and this is in 2019. New numbers, I can update it. $131 million. It would be a 50% increase to maintain that. Per year. Right? Need this now. Hopefully ARPA funds can give us some of this money now. But $131 million per year in residential. The next planning budget, that's $262. 25% of the rest, because the rest of the services, and there's 10 of them, are DSP dependent, and it's a good anchor in my opinion. That gets you another $148 or so million. And that's on this slide The 279 is the number. So I can do 279 million. I don't want to come to the table. I travel with a pen that has a pencil feature because math is done in pencil. I'm not going to come to the table without math I can defend. You can argue assumptions, but the math is pretty solid. $279 million a year to get us to a median salary, you know, all boats raise, right? Tide raises all boats. And that allows us to be competitive, right? That allows Sherry and Sharon to feel confident that the people they're going to hire are well trained. That's what we're talking about. Frankie, right? His attendant is well compensated. Grayson has the supports he needs. Not earth-shattering. I mean, it's really not sophisticated. And Scott and his 3 kids can feel confident that we're just not hiring somebody who's available. We need to be selective. Because not every DSP goes on to be the executive director of an association of community mental health centers. Not every DSP does that. And I say this specifically because at one point I was a DSP. I did that work. It's hard work. It's needed work. Did a long time before most of you were born, but I was a DSP. We need to have confident people in that place. And the idea you do it out of the goodness of your heart is great, but neurosurgeons do great work. They're compensated. So we need to be compensated. You need to be able to go forward and tell people that health, safety, welfare, quality outcomes, good people are hired. $279 million.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Senator Meredith.
Thank you, Chair Riley. Your math was close to mine. I said 300 million, but I was.
I'll take your number. I got an error.
Well, rounding error is what it was, but you know, we've got. I think we identified 2 issues today. One is what do we do immediately? And I think we've all come to the conclusion we've got to use the ARPA funds for that, and that's got to come from the governor's office, and I think we would all support that without a doubt. But then how do you support it ongoing? Mm-hmm. And you've heard me in committee enough that we need more revenue in this state. There's no doubt. And I've been advocating for the past several months that we have to revise our tax code. It's just when you got 50% of your revenue that's exempt from taxation, you got 40% more working age adults not in the workforce. That leaves a small sliver of the pie to carry the burden. That's the working people of this state, and that's not fair to them. And that's a direct result of our current tax code. We have to change that. But that aside, I'm not talking about increasing taxes. I'm talking about increasing tax revenue, and you do that with a fair tax code. But that aside, we spend $15 billion. That's the budgeted amount for the Medicaid program this next year. That is enough money to take care of everybody's needs if we spend it appropriately, with a focus on appropriate use of resources, which we've all talked about the past several months, that we don't do a very good job of. Secondly, reducing the number of people on Medicaid, which you've spoken to, as we improve the economy of the state. Certainly, we need to. We've added 250,000 people during this COVID crisis, and now a third of our state is on Medicaid. That's tragic for any state. So there's a savings there. But also reducing the bureaucracy, which we've all talked about. Nationally, we spend 30 cents of every dollar on administration, double what other industrialized nations do. There's a tremendous opportunity there. But lastly is improving the health of the population. That's where the big bucks are. And I think we could potentially save just probably 20% just from that side alone if someone's doing that. But you know, over the last 10 years, we've only moved that mark just a little bit. I think we're 44th nationally now in health outcomes.
And I would contend that movement may be a reflection of other states as well.
I think it's a reflection of the fact that folks have health care coverage they hadn't had before.
Yeah,
I don't think it's because we've done anything really to move that needle itself. It's just they've got coverage and they can finally seek care. But if we truly want to improve the health of the population, we got to change the model that we've been using. But with those things in combination, I think there's realistically a 20% savings on the Medicaid budget. That's $3 billion right there. The money is there if we do the right things, but we're not doing the right things. So I would take that leap of faith. Again, if I were governor, I'm not governor, I'd take that leap of faith, use the ARPA funds to take care of this immediate need, but then set up these 4 protocols improving the Medicaid budget, and the money is there. And whatever revenue we raise from taxation, we can use it for the purpose, because I can tell you, everybody needs money, but within this program itself, there's enough money there to take everybody's needs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Meredith. Anyone else have any questions? It is obvious from listening to testimony today the pain and the urgency that we have to deal with these issues. I've heard the word crisis used a lot today, and that term has been used a lot in our society in the last year and a half. I think it has been, but it's obvious from listening to it today. I know we got a workforce problem in a lot of areas, but as Sam mentioned earlier, as Stan mentioned earlier, this is an issue that we've got to deal with quickly, and these are the most vulnerable. That's what Stan said earlier. These are the vulnerable people in our society, and we've got to make sure that we try to work to deal with this. And it's easy to feel everybody's pain today. It very much is, and want to thank everybody for their testimony. This has been very enlightening today, and we appreciate everybody that's been here today. Thank you very much. Our next meeting is scheduled at this time on November the 29th, I think, on a Monday, and we'll be talking to all the members of the committee in between there about some more details. Thank you so much. Motion to adjourn.